حان الآن حرية حان.
War correspondents have been stationed overseas to capture the story ever since the First World War broke out. The tactics, however, continuously evolve. From the World Wars to the Vietnam War to today's wars overseas, the tactics behind these war correspondents have changed drastically. For better or for worse, we'll ask. As we analyze history, we will uncover the true answer behind that question. We begin with World War I, 1914. In the First World War, patriotism triumphed over truth. This muddied the waters of reliable journalism. Coverage was biased. Journalists wore the same uniforms as American soldiers and intertwined with the fighters among the action. In wartime, the first casualty is the truth, Australian journalist and professor Philip Knightley says in his famous book, The First Casualty. His research suggests America's first war correspondents were not just storytellers, but they were also propagandists and mythmakers. He says the role of the embedded journalist, specifically in World War I, was to skew the public's outlook on the war, neglecting to reflect the truth of the fighting. War journalism came back on the front in 1939 when Hitler began his occupation of Germany. World War II was a stepping stone in between the embedded journalist approach and the live broadcast we will discuss in the Vietnam era. Radios allowed for the sound of bombs exploding and gunfire to fill the households of families back in America. For the first time, journalists used sound to bring life to their stories. Instead of reporters writing about what was happening, the public could actually listen, hear the voices of commanders, and decide for themselves what they thought. Let's listen.
Program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
In this clip, we hear the news of Pearl Harbor announced live over the radio. This technology was the first step in moving toward immediate news coverage. In 1941, the media utilized stories of patriotism and overcoming battle to motivate the home front to push through and support the war. The simple choices made in stories have great influence on the public, especially with radios being in almost every American home. They depicted war as an honorable cause and attributed freedom to the soldiers who fought against our enemies. Journalists were part of the war effort, typically in support of the cause. With the television playing a bigger role in later roles, journalists started telling more divisive and negative narratives.
Today's operation is the frustration of Vietnam in miniature. There is little doubt that American firepower can win a military victory here. But to a Vietnamese peasant whose home means a lifetime of backbreaking labor, it will take more than presidential promises to convince him that we are on his side.
Journalism plays a huge role in shaping the public's perspective of the war. We see this play out significantly with Vietnam. The news coverage of the Vietnam War changed war journalism forever. When war broke out, networks sent portable cameras and correspondents to the war zone to capture war footage, the first time in history this has ever been done. War became a narrative back home in America, and for the first time, Americans could watch the horrors of war inside their own homes, giving the name of the war as the Television War. These are real news reports that played over the television during the Vietnam War and have been disproven since.
Combined artillery and guerrilla assault that brought limited warfare to Saigon itself. Associated Press photographer Dan Van Falk, who got inside the building, reported bodies were strewn around the rooms.
But with these new advances during the Vietnam War, Americans can finally watch war unfold in front of their eyes. Today, reporters do not have the luxury of a uniform to blend in or an accompanying soldier. Instead, they rely on their own expertise to navigate through the field. This freedom comes with a price. In the last 5 years, over 1,500 war correspondents have been killed. Opposing militias see journalists as a threat. Journalists are not neutral observers, but instead the messenger. According to the committee that protects journalists, 75 journalists have been killed in Syria since 2011, with many more occurring around the world. This is the director, Tina Carr. Let's listen to her as she discusses the new challenges that face these type of journalists.
It's been good and it's been bad. The good is that they can act very, very speedily, very immediately, providing absolutely instant live coverage of what's going on. The flip side is that they are in the middle of it. They're not getting away from it. And as they're reporting and as they're recording, they've got to be watching over their shoulder what's happening.
We live in an interesting time. With technological advances happening faster than ever, the methods of war journalism become far more dangerous. War reporting is heavily integrated with how the public views American foreign affairs. With the developments in communication technology, journalists have adapted to bring the news as fast and accurate as possible. From the original newspapers to social media allowing instant news, the changes that have occurred over the last 60 years have been radical.
I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier. I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier. I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier. I got soul, but I'm not a soldier. I got soul, but